Yesterday on Ramblings with Rebecca, we looked at a very initial, very basic framework for classifying different kinds of environmental peace building. Today we're going to look at water diplomacy, which is what I would classify as a subset of environmental peace building, and the one that's kind of gotten the most attention thus far and has actually quite a lot of literature around it. Water diplomacy is not explicitly in almost all of the literature actually called environmental peace building, and so one of the things I'm starting to question in my research is, do I want to classify it as this? Is there a helpful, benefit to, saying, in some ways what water diplomacy is actually very similar to, what these, kids on the ground in this country are doing, that kind of thing. But it certainly fits onto the framework and into my current very broad definition of environmental peace building. So we're going to start testing this claim and float it by various people, including you. So water diplomacy is states generally in a river basin engaging in multilateral negotiations around the water resources. So this is negotiations over dam construction in the Nile. This is fisheries agreements along the Mekong River. These are river basin organizations, okay? And lots of conversation around water diplomacy, lots of, some of you may remember in the 1990s and, still today, there's lots of kind of, I don't want to say scare tactics, but scare tactics, of like water war in the Middle East and that kind of thing. Water diplomacy is very much kind of the counter narrative to that, saying like, no, we don't have to fight over water, we can cooperate over it instead. And you can expand that to say that's what environmental peace building in general is saying, right? Like, we don't need to see the environment as something to, fight and conflict over. Instead, we can use it as something to bring us together. So if we put water diplomacy onto the framework that I presented yesterday, the communities involved, nation states, okay, actual countries. The scalar level of the peace building, what level is it at? It's internationally, generally within river basins, so it means neighboring countries are doing this. The actors involved, national governments, so the governments themselves via, policymakers. Who is facilitating, moderating, funding the peace building? This, of course, depends because I'm looking at water diplomacy, not at a specific case study of water diplomacy. But generally, the governments themselves, right, are funding the negotiations. Perhaps, bringing in, buying in, facilitation, by hired consultants, some kind of, management firm or whatever, and or, input from organizations like the United Nations Environment Program, those kind of folks. The natural resource or aspect of the environment that's being used to promote the peace building is here, of course, fresh water within river basins. But also you can expand that to say, dam technologies, fish, those kind of things. And then what motivation is being used to incentivize the peace building? I would say here primarily for for water diplomacy, also known as hydrodiplomacy, stability for the governments themselves, but also, of course, the continued supply of fresh water, which we all like, I think, for the most part. So this was just kind of a quickie attempt to see, to see, does this framework make sense? Is it helping to classify? Helpful thus far for me, I think at least. Whether or not it says anything useful to the world at large, it still very much remains to be seen. I started with water diplomacy, one, because that's what my supervisor does quite a lot of, and considers a lot. She's very much a water person and very much does kind of, nation-state agreements and that kind of thing. But two, because that's what not just my supervisor does, but, the world at large does. Water diplomacy is one of the places where actually I would argue environmental peace building does exist in the literature. That's not something that's super new. That is something that is being talked about. There's a very big report just published by Adelphi, that got quite a lot of attention. And I'll post a link to that below. So, of course, when you do a PhD, you kind of have to start by looking at, what is the literature out right now? What is it saying? And then you start to look at what is the gap. Right, and so for me, the gap is that, we have this attention to, big stuff around river basins at nation-state levels, but that's not being connected to, more local kinds of activism that actually are driven by much the same rationales. So I'm looking at how we can better connect all of that rationale going on, and we'll see how that works.